Hey everyone, welcome to my channel from start to now. If you love uncovering hidden stories from history, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss our future videos. Let's dive in. When you think of Canada, you probably picture maple syrup, hockey and polite neighbors, right? But what if I told you that beneath this calm, friendly image lies a hidden history filled with rebellions, secret battles, untold heroics, and shocking stories that most Americans have never learned. Stories that could completely change the way you see our northern neighbor forever. When most people think of Canada, a few images probably come to mind: endless snow, covered landscapes, maple syrup, ice hockey, friendly neighbors, maybe even Mounties in red coats. But the reality is that this perception barely scratches the surface of what Canada really is. Beneath the polite, calm exterior of this northern country lies a history that is surprisingly complex, dramatic, and full of stories that most Americans have never learned. Canada wasn't just quietly developing alongside the United States. It was a land where rebellions were fought, communities were built against incredible odds, and choices made hundreds of years ago directly shaped the political and cultural landscape of North America. The first thing to understand about Canada's hidden history is that it was a land of survival, resilience, and migration long before the modern nation existed. Indigenous peoples had been living there for thousands of years, developing rich cultures, languages, and political systems that spanned vast regions. From the Haudenosaunee in the east to the Cree and Dene in the north, and the Salish and Coast peoples in the west, these societies were sophisticated, resilient, and deeply connected to the land. When European settlers arrived, Canada quickly became a crossroads of cultures, conflicts, and economies, a place where the old world met the new in ways that were often dramatic, transformative, and sometimes tragic. One of the most astonishing elements of Canada's hidden history is its role as a haven for enslaved African Americans escaping the United States via the Underground Railroad. Most Americans have learned bits and pieces about the Underground Railroad, usually ending at the U.S.-Canada border, but the reality is that the journey didn't stop there. Thousands of courageous people risked everything, fleeing through forests, rivers, and mountains, knowing that freedom wasn't guaranteed until they reached Canadian soil. Cities like Toronto, Windsor, and Halifax became safe havens where black communities could grow, thrive, and preserve their culture, often under harsh and unfamiliar conditions. These communities are an essential part of Canadian history, yet they are almost entirely absent from mainstream American education, making this a hidden chapter that has shaped both countries in profound ways. Canada's role as a safe haven didn't just happen by accident. Its legal and political structures were deliberately different from those in the United States, allowing black refugees to claim freedom once they crossed the border. This made Canada a land of hope for those fleeing oppression, but it also created tensions and challenges, as newcomers had to integrate into communities that were not always welcoming. Despite these challenges, many black Canadians succeeded in establishing schools, churches, and businesses, contributing to the social and economic development of the nation in ways that few Americans realize. Beyond the story of the Underground Railroad, Canada's history is full of conflicts and rebellions that challenge the image of a quiet, peaceful country. Take the War of 1812, for example. While Americans often focus on the battlefields along their own borders, Canada was directly involved, repelling multiple invasions by U.S. forces. Canadian militias, often made up of settlers, Indigenous allies, and even escaped slaves, played crucial roles in defending the territory. The outcome of these battles didn't just protect Canada, it shaped the very identity and borders of the United States. Had Canada fallen during those invasions, North America could have looked completely different today. These conflicts reveal a Canada that was not passively observing history, it was actively shaping it, often in ways that remain unacknowledged outside the country. Then there's the story of the Red River Rebellion, another chapter that many Americans have never heard of. In 1869, the Métis people, led by Louis Riel, rose up to defend their land, culture, and rights against encroaching settlers and government forces. This wasn't a small skirmish. It was a pivotal moment in Canadian history that determined how minority rights and cultural preservation would be approached for decades to come. Riel himself became a symbol of resistance, and his execution made him a controversial figure for generations. Today, he is celebrated as a hero who fought to ensure that Canada's identity would not erase its Indigenous and Métis populations. These rebellions, conflicts, and acts of courage show a Canada that is far from the polite, quiet nation most people imagine. It's a country shaped by struggle, negotiation, and resilience, where communities fought hard to survive, assert their rights, and preserve their identities. Even small towns and remote regions have stories of bravery, survival, and adaptation that are rarely told outside the country, creating a hidden historical landscape that is both fascinating and essential to understanding North America as a whole. Another overlooked aspect of Canada's hidden history is its early economic and cultural significance. While Americans often focus on the colonies along the East Coast, Canada was already a hub of trade, exploration, and settlement long before the United States became a global power. The fur trade, led by companies like the Hudson's Bay Company, not only financed European colonization, but also created complex networks of alliances and conflicts with Indigenous peoples. These economic activities shaped settlement patterns, cultural exchanges, and even geopolitical dynamics in ways that are often ignored in mainstream narratives. The impact of these early developments is still visible today in the cities, infrastructure, and social fabric of modern Canada. Even the path of migration and settlement in Canada tells a hidden story of diversity and adaptation. Immigrants from Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean arrived to build new lives, facing harsh climates, unfamiliar terrain, and social challenges. Each group left its mark on the nation's culture, economy, and politics, creating a mosaic of experiences that is rarely acknowledged in simplified histories. For instance, the arrival of Scottish, Irish, and French settlers brought languages, traditions, and governance structures that continue to influence Canada today, while Asian immigrants contributed to labor, trade, and community development despite facing discrimination and exclusionary laws. These stories reveal a Canada that was constantly evolving, adapting, and growing, shaped by the struggles and contributions of countless individuals whose stories are often hidden from the broader historical narrative. And then there's the Canadian role in international conflicts, which also goes largely unrecognized. Canadians fought in both world wars, often with remarkable bravery and significant impact, long before Americans were fully engaged. The sacrifices of Canadian soldiers at Dieppe, Normandy, and in liberating the Netherlands were immense, yet these stories are rarely part of the standard historical curriculum in the U.S. Even the political decisions that allowed Canada to become an early contributor to these efforts are part of a hidden narrative of foresight, strategy, and courage. When you step back and look at the entirety of Canada's history, a pattern emerges. It's a land full of hidden stories that challenge assumptions, reveal resilience, and illustrate the complexity of human experience. From Indigenous cultures that have thrived for thousands of years, to enslaved African Americans seeking freedom, to rebellions and military campaigns that shaped borders and identities, Canada's past is rich, multifaceted, and often surprising. Most importantly, it reminds us that history is not a single story. It's a collection of perspectives, struggles, and achievements that deserve to be recognized and explored. When most people think about Canada, they rarely think about its role in global conflicts. But the reality is that Canada has a military history that is both rich and often underappreciated, with contributions that have had lasting impacts on the world and even shaped the outcomes of major wars in ways most Americans and even many Canadians themselves don't fully realize. Canada's involvement in global conflicts stretches back centuries, beginning with colonial skirmishes and battles that predate the formation of the modern nation, but it became particularly significant during the two world wars, where Canadian soldiers, strategists, and support personnel played pivotal roles on multiple fronts. One of the most striking aspects of Canada's military history is the fact that, relative to its population, Canada often contributed more than larger nations during critical periods, particularly in the early stages of the World Wars, long before the United States formally entered these conflicts. In World War I, for instance, Canada's commitment to the Allied effort was remarkable, with thousands of troops volunteering to fight in Europe, many from small towns and rural communities where the idea of going overseas was both daunting and heroic. The Battle of Vimy Ridge in 1917 is often cited as a defining moment in Canadian history, where Canadian forces, facing treacherous terrain, fierce resistance, and immense casualties, successfully captured a strategic position that had eluded previous Allied forces. This victory not only demonstrated Canada's military skill, but also helped forge a sense of national identity, as soldiers from across the young nation worked together to achieve a goal that seemed nearly impossible. Many Americans are familiar with the major battles of World War I, but they rarely hear about Canada's contributions, which were essential to the Allied success and laid the groundwork for the country's later international reputation. Moving into World War II, Canada's role becomes even more striking. Long before the United States entered the war following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Canada had already mobilized troops, built supply chains, and committed itself fully to the Allied effort. Canadian forces were instrumental in numerous campaigns, from the grueling and tragic Deep Raid in 1942, where thousands of Canadian soldiers displayed extraordinary bravery despite overwhelming odds, to the monumental efforts during the D-Day invasion of Normandy, where Canadian troops secured key beaches and pushed inland under heavy fire. The sacrifices made by these soldiers are staggering, with countless lives lost and communities forever changed. Yet these stories rarely receive the recognition they deserve outside of Canada. The contribution of Canadian forces wasn't limited to the battlefield either. Canada played a critical role in logistics, intelligence, and training, establishing bases, supply depots, and communication networks that supported the entire Allied operation in Europe. Canadian pilots, sailors, and soldiers worked alongside British, American, and other Allied forces, often facing some of the most dangerous missions with courage and determination. The impact of these efforts cannot be overstated, as they were instrumental in turning the tide of the war and ensuring that strategic objectives were met. Yet much of this history remains hidden from popular narratives. Beyond World War II, Canada also played important roles in other global conflicts, including the Korean War, peacekeeping missions, and even covert operations during the Cold War. Canadian forces were often sent into high-risk situations where they had to navigate not only hostile environments but also complex international politics. During the Cold War, Canadian intelligence agencies worked tirelessly to monitor espionage, intercept communications, and contribute to strategies that helped counter global threats, often in cooperation with allied nations. These contributions, while less visible than battlefield heroics, were equally crucial in maintaining global stability and preventing conflicts from escalating. One of the fascinating aspects of Canada's role in these global conflicts is how it reflects the nation's broader approach to international engagement. Unlike larger powers that often sought direct domination or territorial gains, Canada frequently focused on strategic, supportive, and collaborative roles that leveraged its strengths, whether through well-trained troops, technological innovation, or logistical expertise. This approach allowed Canada to punch above its weight on the global stage, influencing outcomes in ways that many people never learn about. Another often overlooked part of Canada's military history is the involvement of Indigenous peoples, immigrants, and minority communities. From the earliest conflicts to the World Wars, these groups played crucial roles, sometimes serving in segregated units or facing discrimination, while still contributing heroically. Indigenous warriors brought unique skills and knowledge to battlefields, while immigrants often fought to prove their loyalty to their new homeland. Their stories add depth and complexity to Canada's military legacy, highlighting how diverse communities came together to shape the nation's impact on global conflicts. Canada's contributions were also significant in terms of innovation and strategy. Canadian forces were involved in developing new tactics, engineering solutions, and technological advancements that improved military effectiveness and saved countless lives. For example, in World War II, Canadian engineers helped design and construct critical infrastructure, from bridges to airfields, that allowed Allied forces to maneuver and supply troops effectively. Canadian scientists also contributed to important medical and technological breakthroughs, supporting the war effort in ways that were not always visible on the front lines, but were crucial to success. The stories of heroism, sacrifice, and innovation in Canada's military history are not only inspiring, but also deeply educational. They challenge the simplistic idea that Canada has always been a passive, peaceful neighbor to the United States. In reality, Canada has repeatedly stepped up during times of crisis, committing resources, personnel, and expertise to conflicts that shaped the modern world. Understanding this history gives us a richer perspective on North America as a whole, highlighting the interconnectedness of our nations and the shared responsibilities that come with being part of a larger global community. Even today, Canada continues to play a critical role in international peacekeeping, humanitarian missions, and defense alliances. The legacy of its contributions during past conflicts informs current policies, military training, and strategic planning, ensuring that Canada remains a respected and influential player on the world stage. By examining the hidden stories of Canadian involvement in global conflicts, we gain insight not only into the courage and sacrifice of individual soldiers, but also into the broader social, political, and cultural forces that shaped the nation. This history helps explain why Canada's identity is distinct from, yet intertwined with, that of the United States and other nations, and it highlights the importance of recognizing contributions that often go unnoticed in mainstream narratives. From the battlefields of Europe to the intelligence offices of Ottawa, from the snowy plains of the north to the jungles and deserts of faraway lands, Canada's role in global conflicts is a story of courage, strategy, sacrifice, and resilience, and it deserves to be remembered and celebrated. Alongside the histories of other nations whose contributions are more widely known when most people think of Canada, they imagine polite citizens, clean cities, and stunning natural landscapes. But beneath that image lies a history of struggle, resilience, and injustice that is often overlooked, especially when it comes to Indigenous peoples and minority communities, whose stories have been marginalized for centuries. And yet understanding these struggles is essential to truly grasp Canada's past and its impact on the present. Canada is a land that was built on the complex relationships between European settlers, Indigenous nations, and later, immigrants from around the world, but too often, history books simplify this reality, presenting a picture of a peaceful settlement rather than the multifaceted struggles that shaped the nation, and at the heart of these struggles is the story of Canada's Indigenous peoples, who had been living on the land for thousands of years with highly sophisticated social, political, and cultural systems before European colonization disrupted everything. The arrival of European settlers brought with it not only trade and new technologies, but also disease, displacement, and the imposition of foreign governance systems that undermined indigenous ways of life, and over time these pressures intensified, culminating in policies that were intentionally designed to erase indigenous culture and identity, a reality that is often glossed over in mainstream narratives. Yet it shaped generations and left deep scars on communities across the country. One of the most egregious examples of this is the residential school system, which began in the 19th century and continued well into the 20th century, a system designed to forcibly assimilate indigenous children by removing them from their families, forbidding them from speaking their languages, practicing their traditions, and punishing them for maintaining cultural ties, which caused profound trauma that is still being addressed today. And although these schools were promoted under the guise of education, the reality was far darker, including abuse, neglect, and in some cases, the death of children, a history that is only recently receiving the acknowledgement and attention it deserves. Alongside Indigenous struggles, Canada's history also includes the contributions and challenges of Black Canadians, many of whom were escaping slavery in the United States via the Underground Railroad, seeking freedom in a land that promised safety but was not always free from discrimination. These communities faced unique hardships, having to build schools, churches, and businesses from scratch while navigating societal prejudice. Yet their resilience created thriving communities that enriched Canadian society in ways that often go unnoticed in mainstream education. The intertwining of Indigenous and Black histories in Canada is complex and illuminating, highlighting how marginalized groups often supported one another while navigating systemic obstacles, and this dynamic shaped the social fabric of Canada in profound ways, influencing political movements, community development, and cultural preservation that continue to resonate today. Another hidden chapter of Canada's history is the story of the Métis people and their fight to preserve their identity and land, exemplified by the Red River Rebellion of 1869, led by Riel, a charismatic and controversial figure whose actions were driven by the desire to protect the rights and culture of the Métis in the face of encroaching settlement and government expansion. Riel's leadership ultimately cost him his life as he was executed for treason, yet his legacy endured, shaping Canadian policies around minority rights, land claims, and cultural recognition, demonstrating how struggles for justice and equality have been central to the development of the nation, even when those involved were vilified or silenced at the time. Beyond the residential schools and political rebellions, Indigenous and minority communities in Canada faced a host of systemic barriers, from restrictive laws on land ownership and voting rights to exclusion from certain professions and social services, creating cycles of disadvantage that generations had to overcome. Despite these obstacles, Indigenous peoples, Black Canadians, and other minority groups demonstrated remarkable resilience, preserving languages, traditions, and knowledge systems, while also contributing to the broader Canadian society through art, politics, business, and activism. These contributions are often hidden because they exist alongside narratives that focus on European settler achievements, yet without recognizing the struggles and accomplishments of marginalized communities, any understanding of Canadian history is incomplete, and acknowledging these stories is critical to building a fuller, more accurate picture of the nation. The ongoing impact of these struggles can still be seen today, from disparities in health, education, and economic opportunity to ongoing land disputes and legal battles over rights and recognition, highlighting that the history of Indigenous and minority communities is not just a relic of past but a living, evolving story that continues to shape Canadian society. In recent years, there has been a growing awareness and acknowledgement of these historical injustices, including national apologies, truth and reconciliation commissions, and efforts to preserve languages and cultural practices that were once under threat. Yet these initiatives are only the beginning, as the process of addressing centuries of marginalization and trauma is complex and ongoing, requiring both societal commitment and individual understanding. Understanding the hidden struggles of Indigenous and minority communities also challenges the conventional narrative of Canada as a universally peaceful and just nation, revealing instead a layered reality where courage, resistance, and resilience have been necessary for survival and cultural preservation, and these stories offer powerful lessons about human endurance, solidarity, and the fight for justice that are relevant far beyond Canadian borders. The impact of these struggles is also reflected in culture, literature, and art, where Indigenous and minority voices have used storytelling to preserve history, express resistance, and educate broader audiences about the realities of life under systemic oppression, ensuring that these histories are not lost and continue to influence contemporary conversations around identity, equity, and inclusion. Additionally, the experiences of these communities highlight the ways in which laws, policies, and government actions can have profound and lasting effects on populations, emphasizing the importance of accountability, advocacy, and historical awareness, as the consequences of past actions reverberate through generations, shaping both social structures and individual lives in ways that are often hidden from plain view. By exploring these struggles in depth, we gain insight not only into the challenges faced by Indigenous and minority populations, but also into the broader societal dynamics that have shaped Canada as a nation, showing how resilience and courage in the face of adversity are central to understanding the country's history, and these narratives encourage reflection, empathy, and a more nuanced appreciation of the complexity of historical events. When we connect the experiences of Indigenous peoples, Black Canadians, the Métis, and other marginalized groups, we see a tapestry of resilience and survival, where communities fought to maintain their identity, culture, and rights while contributing meaningfully to the broader development of nation, highlighting that Canada's history is not a single story but a mosaic of experiences, struggles, and triumphs that deserve recognition and understanding. When most people think about Canada, they often focus on its landscapes, politeness, and perhaps its political stability, but what they rarely realize is that Canada has had a profound impact on culture, science, and the economy, not just within its own borders but globally, and these contributions are often overlooked in mainstream narratives, leaving a hidden story that deserves attention, appreciation, and understanding. Canada's cultural contributions are significant and multifaceted, extending far beyond maple syrup and hockey, and they have played a key role in shaping literature, music, art, and even film on an international scale. Writers like Margaret Atwood, whose works explore identity, feminism, and human nature, have not only shaped Canadian literary identity, but have also influenced global conversations about society, ethics, and environmental responsibility. while Alice Munro, a Nobel Prize-winning author, has captured the complexity of human relationships in ways that resonate universally. Leonard Cohen's music, poetry, and art have left a lasting impact on popular culture, blending introspective lyricism with themes of love, spirituality, and social critique. And this artistic richness is mirrored in Canada's diverse communities, where Indigenous art, French-Canadian traditions, and immigrant cultures have all contributed to a cultural mosaic that is uniquely Canadian yet globally relevant. What makes Canada's cultural impact particularly striking is how it has emerged from a history of resilience, adaptation, and negotiation among diverse communities, including Indigenous peoples, French and British settlers, and waves of immigrants from around the world, each of whom brought languages, traditions, and knowledge systems that have enriched the nation and allowed it to contribute meaningfully to global culture, often in ways that go unrecognized outside its borders. Alongside its cultural achievements, Canada has also been a leader in scientific innovation and discovery, producing breakthroughs that have had profound effects on health, medicine, technology, and the environment. Perhaps one of the most famous examples is the discovery of insulin by Frederick Banting and Charles Best in 1921, a medical breakthrough that transformed the treatment of diabetes and saved millions of lives worldwide. This achievement demonstrates how Canadian research and ingenuity have contributed to solving some of the most pressing challenges in human health. Yet it is a story that many outside of Canada only learn about in passing, even though it represents a critical chapter in the history of global medicine. Canada's contributions extend far beyond medicine, encompassing advances in aerospace, telecommunications, and environmental science, as well as innovations in engineering and materials science that have supported industries and improved quality of life on multiple continents, showing that countries' influence is not limited to cultural or political achievements, but spans practical, tangible innovations that touch everyday lives. Economically, Canada has long played a pivotal role in the development of North America, beginning with early trade networks and the fur trade, which connected European settlers with Indigenous communities in mutually influential relationships that shaped settlement patterns, social structures, and economic growth. The Hudson's Bay Company, founded in 1670, became one of the most powerful trading enterprises in the world, controlling vast territories and resources, and facilitating commerce that helped build the foundations of modern economies across the continent. Yet this influence is rarely emphasized in mainstream discussions, which often focus primarily on the United States. Canada's economic history is also intertwined with immigration and settlement, as waves of newcomers contributed labor, entrepreneurship, and cultural diversity that drove growth in cities, agriculture, and industry, creating a resilient and adaptable economy capable of responding to global shifts while maintaining strong domestic development. The intersection of cultural, scientific, and economic contributions demonstrates that Canada's influence is multidimensional, shaping not only what people read, hear, and experience culturally, but also what they know scientifically and how societies function economically. For example, Canadian innovation in telecommunications and technology, such as developments in early computing, telecommunications networks, and information systems, has influenced global communication patterns, while the country's commitment to research and education has helped cultivate generations of scientists, engineers, and innovators who continue to impact fields worldwide. Indigenous contributions are also central to this story, as traditional knowledge, sustainable practices, and artistic expressions have enriched Canada's cultural, scientific, and economic landscapes, providing models for sustainable development, environmental stewardship, and community resilience. that are increasingly relevant in a globalized world facing environmental and social challenges. Furthermore, Canada's cultural and scientific achievements are closely linked to its economic development, as artistic industries, research institutions, and innovative enterprises not only create knowledge and beauty, but also generate employment, trade, and international collaboration, reinforcing the idea that culture, science, and economy are not separate domains, but interconnected forces that shape society holistically. In addition to these historical contributions, Canada has also influenced global perspectives through diplomacy, trade agreements, and participation in international organizations, leveraging its cultural, scientific, and economic strengths to build partnerships and support collaborative efforts that address global challenges from health crises to environmental sustainability. This highlights how Canada's hidden history of impact is not just about domestic achievement, but also about its ability to shape and influence international outcomes in ways that are often understated in mainstream narratives. When you examine the cumulative effect of Canada's cultural, scientific, and economic contributions, a pattern emerges of a country that consistently punches above its weight, blending creativity, intellect, and strategic vision to influence the world, often without seeking recognition. Yet, impact is undeniable, from Nobel Prize winning discoveries to internationally acclaimed literature, from indigenous cultural preservation to economic innovations that helped define continental development. These contributions also challenge common perceptions that Canada is merely a peaceful, quiet neighbor to the United States, instead revealing a dynamic nation with a rich, multifaceted history of influence, achievement, and resilience that has shaped global culture, science, and economy in profound ways. Canada's history reminds us that influence is not always about dominance or visibility. Sometimes it's about the quiet, sustained contributions that ripple across generations, changing lives, ideas, and systems in ways that may not always make headlines, but are no less significant, and recognizing these hidden achievements helps us develop a more complete, nuanced understanding of North America and the interconnected world. By exploring the cultural, scientific, and economic impact of Canada, we gain insight into a nation that is innovative, resilient, and creative, where diverse communities have collaborated, resisted, and contributed to shaping both domestic identity and global progress, highlighting the importance of looking beyond stereotypes and surface-level narratives to appreciate the full scope of historical and contemporary contributions. The story of Canada's impact in these areas is ongoing, with new innovations, cultural achievements, and economic strategies continuing to emerge, demonstrating that Canada's hidden influence is not just a part of the past, but a living, evolving force that continues to shape the present and future of the nation and the world. When people think about Canada, most envision polite citizens, vast landscapes, hockey, and maple syrup. But beneath this familiar image lies a history filled with hidden facts and surprising realities that challenge the very perception many have of the country. And understanding these stories reveals a Canada that is far more complex, dynamic, and influential than popular culture often suggests. A nation whose contributions, struggles, and peculiarities have often been overlooked by both Americans and the wider world. One of the first things that shocks many people is realizing how deeply Canada has been involved in shaping continental history, often in ways that are invisible in mainstream narratives, and this starts with the border itself, one of the most peaceful in the world today, but historically anything but guaranteed to be so. Canada's northern territories and provinces were sites of repeated conflict and negotiation, including during the War of 1812, when American forces attempted multiple invasions, only to be repelled by a combination of Canadian militias, Indigenous allies, and British regulars, an effort that directly influenced the formation and identity of both Canada and the United States, showing that Canada's role in shaping North American history has been quietly essential, yet largely underappreciated. Beyond military conflicts, Canada's hidden history also includes moments of rebellion, resistance, and social upheaval that few outside the country ever learn about. The Red River Rebellion of 1869, led by Riel, is one of the most remarkable examples where the Métis fought to protect their land, culture, and political rights against a rapidly expanding government. Riel's leadership, the subsequent uprising, and his eventual execution shaped Canadian policies on minority rights and cultural recognition for generations, highlighting a struggle for justice and identity that is rarely discussed in international historical narratives. Similarly, Canada's Indigenous communities have faced systemic oppression through mechanisms like residential schools, which forcibly removed children from their families and attempted to erase their languages, traditions, and cultural identities, a dark and painful chapter that is only recently being fully acknowledged, but understanding it is crucial to seeing the full picture of the nation's past, and it challenges the common perception of Canada as uniformly peaceful and benevolent. Canada's hidden history also extends into international affairs, where its contributions are frequently underestimated. In both world wars, Canadian forces displayed extraordinary bravery and effectiveness, often acting before the United States fully entered the conflicts. Canadian troops fought pivotal battles at Vimy Ridge, Dieppe, and Normandy, enduring heavy casualties and extreme conditions, and their strategic contributions to Allied victories were enormous, yet these efforts are seldom emphasized in global historical narratives, leaving many unaware of the extent to which Canada helped shape the outcome of these wars. Even outside traditional warfare, Canada has been involved in espionage, intelligence gathering, and covert operations during the Cold War, conducting missions and surveillance that played critical roles in international diplomacy and security, activities that remained secret for decades and are only now coming to light, further challenging the assumption that Canada has always been a quiet observer on the global stage rather than an active participant. Canada's hidden history also includes surprising cultural and scientific achievements that contradict the idea that its influence is limited to within its borders. The discovery of insulin by Frederick Banting and Charles Best in 1921 transformed medicine worldwide, saving millions of lives, and Canadian scientists and engineers have contributed innovations in technology, environmental research, and infrastructure development that have shaped global progress in tangible ways, showing that Canada's impact often extends far beyond its geographic size or political clout. Another area where Canada surprises many people is its economic and trade influence. Early fur trading networks, controlled by organizations like the Hudson's Bay Company, played a pivotal role in shaping the continent's economic landscape, connecting Indigenous communities, European settlers, and global markets in ways that laid the foundation for modern commerce in North America. Canada's natural resources, including timber, minerals, and energy, have historically been essential not just to domestic development, but also to international markets, making the nation an economic player whose contributions are frequently overlooked, despite their critical importance. Beyond the historical, Canada also has some quirky and lesser-known facts that are astonishing, including stories of UFO sightings and secret investigations in the mid-20th century, such as the famous Shag Harbor incident in Nova Scotia, which attracted military and civilian attention and reflects a Canada that is both serious about national security and curious about unexplained phenomena. These incidents challenge the calm, orderly image often associated with Canada and add layers to the country's hidden history, demonstrating that not all of its remarkable stories are strictly political, military, or economic. they are also cultural, mysterious, and sometimes even downright strange. Canada's role as a haven for escaped enslaved people via the Underground Railroad also continues to challenge assumptions, revealing a society that, while not free from prejudice, offered hope and freedom when it was most needed, and these communities not only survived but thrived, contributing to the cultural and social fabric of the nation in ways that have lasting significance. Another surprising aspect is the diversity of communities that shaped Canada, from Indigenous groups to European settlers to immigrants from Asia, the Caribbean, and beyond, each of whom faced unique challenges, discrimination, and hardships, while simultaneously contributing to the richness, resilience, and creativity of Canadian society, creating a hidden tapestry of cultural, social, and economic development that is rarely highlighted outside the country. Canada's hidden history also forces a reconsideration of what it means to be influential, showing that impact is not always measured in conquest or domination, but often in quiet, sustained contributions to knowledge, culture, and society. Through diplomacy, humanitarian efforts, peacekeeping missions, scientific breakthroughs, and artistic innovation, Canada has shaped global outcomes in ways that are not always immediately visible, but are no less important, demonstrating that the country's influence has always been complex, multi-dimensional, and often under-recognized. Recognizing these hidden facts challenges perceptions and encourages a more nuanced understanding of Canada, where bravery, resilience, innovation, and cultural richness coexist alongside struggle, resistance, and inequality, painting a portrait of a nation far more dynamic and influential than its popular image might suggest. Exploring Canada's hidden history also reminds us that historical narratives are often incomplete and selective, shaped by who tells the story and what is deemed important, and that by uncovering the less visible, overlooked, or forgotten chapters, we gain a more accurate, layered, and compelling understanding of the country's role in continental and global history, highlighting lessons about courage, adaptation, and the ongoing pursuit of justice and recognition. Whether it's the overlooked battles, the stories of marginalized communities, the scientific discoveries, the cultural achievements, or the quirky, unexpected incidents, these hidden facts reveal that Canada is a nation whose impact has been profound, multifaceted, and often underappreciated, and they encourage a reassessment of assumptions, inviting curiosity, reflection, and a deeper engagement with history that extends beyond the surface-level narratives many are familiar with.